Hello everyone, this is Hina Nawaz, and the topic of my presentation is regulation and integration of metabolism. So, before going to the details of this topic, first of all, I would like to show you a very known picture that all the students who belong to the field of biological sciences must have seen this picture in their biochemical course or biochemistry course. So it looks quite difficult, but today we will going to study this topic, that how does your metabolism work and regulate all the biochemical pathways inside your body in a very coordinated and regulated manner. So this is the layout of the topic. First we will going to see about the overview of metabolism and its integration, and then we will going to see the major metabolic pathways, and then the different metabolic state which is present in our body, and what will be the hormonal influence in regulating or coordinating all these metabolic pathways, and lastly we're going to see about tissue specific metabolic regulation and integration. Okay, I would like to start with the basic terminology, that what actually the metabolism is. So as you all know that whatever the food we take, so in the form of either the protein or the carbs or the lipid, as I have shown in this picture, as A, B or C, whatever the food we take, so inside our body it is being catabolized or break down into smaller molecules for the sake of energy in the form of ATP that is being used by our cells in the form of energy. And then all this monomeric unit combine together to form a macromolecules that is according to the body requirement for the growth or the other cellular pathways that are very essential for our body to be conducted. So the catabolism or the anabolism, both collectively known as metabolism. In the next slide, I have mentioned about the integration of metabolism, that what actually the integration of metabolism is. So as I have mentioned that whatever the food we eat, all these macromolecules in the form of carbohydrate, lipid or the protein, how all these macromolecules are being coordinated with each other inside our body for the sake of energy. So that is known as the integration of metabolism. And as you all know that our bodies is organized in a very coordinated manner via different biochemical pathways through the different regulatory pathways inside our body, which are responsible for many different purposes. So our body as an integrated system, it works like an integrated system which is based on different organs, tissues, cells. All these things required energy for the nourishment, for the growth, and for in order to process the further different essential processes which are very fundamental for our biological basis for life. Actually, I mentioned about the cellular respiration, and this, whenever we thought about this process, the very essential process that occur inside our cells. So the first thing that we came up with a very essential organelle that is well known as a powerhouse of the cell, that is the mitochondria, the main organelle that would be considered in the cellular respiration. So as you can see in the slide, I have mentioned one of the very essential unit source, actually the fuel that is used by our cells, that is the glucose, and that glucose will be converted into pyruvate by a process that is known as the glycolysis. And depending upon the availability of the oxygen, if the oxygen is present inside the cell, so that pyruvate will undergo a TCA cycle or the Krebs cycle and the mitochondria, and then the electron transport chain, and finally it gives us 34 to 36 ATP in the presence of oxygen. So basically this is the aerobic respiration. And on the another side, as you can see in this flowchart, that if the oxygen is not present, if the condition is anaerobic, so that pyruvate will be going to be converted into lactic acid or the ethanol via a process known as fermentation. So these macromolecules, the protein, carbs, or the lipids, converted to a monomeric unit via a catabolic pathway inside our cells. In order to convert all these monomeric units into ATP. So majorly our body uses glucose as a source of energy. So carbs will be converted into glucose, fructose, galactose. All these monomeric units are related with the carbohydrates. And on the right side, I have mentioned about the lipids. So the lipid will be converted into a monomeric unit, that is fatty acid or the glycerol. And on the left hand side, as you can see, the protein that will be converted into a monomeric unit, that is amino acid. So all these macromolecules are converted into their monomeric units and via different biochemical pathway that has been mentioned in this slide, like glucose undergo a glycolysis pathway, or the lipid will undergo a beta oxidation. The fatty acid will it will be converted into fatty acid and glycerol, and the protein will be degraded into amino acid. So lastly, the glucose will be converted into, if there will be a large amount of glucose present inside the body, so it will convert into a glycogen. So glycogenesis has been mentioned in the slide, and then all this monomeric unit will convert it into a pyruvic acid or the acetyl-CoA if we talk about the fatty acid. So this will undergo lastly the TCA cycle via following their own pathways. They will ultimately undergo a TCA cycle or enter into a TCA cycle. Then the TCA cycle, from the TCA cycle, we actually got the electron carriers, the molecules which carry the electron in the form of the NADH or the FADH2. All these molecules will undergo electron transport chain, and we got the energy. And in this slide, I have mentioned the cellular respiration in a more elaborative manner, that glycolysis pathway occur in the cytoplasmic region of the cell, and it is basically comprised of the two phases. One is the investment phase, in which the body the cells are invest to ATP, and then we got all those net gain of ATP in the payoff phase, in the second phase of the cycle. So that glucose molecule, the carbon 6 containing molecule, will ultimately convert it into a pyruvate, the two molecules of the pyruvate, and we got from one molecule of glucose the two pyruvate molecules, along with the net gain of two ATPs as mentioned in the slide, and two NADH. And then this pyruvate will undergo another conversion, that this pyruvate is converted into acetyl-CoA. So via enzyme, that is pyruvate dehydrogenase. So that pyruvate converted into acetyl-CoA, and along the acetyl-CoA oxaloacetate, that is the C4 carbon, these two molecules, the carbon 2, that is the acetyl-CoA, and the carbon 4, that is oxaloacetate, converted into a 6 carbon compound, that is citrate. And all this cycle will be completed, and at the end of this cycle, the one acetyl-CoA will give us 3 NADH and 1 FADH2 and 1 GTP molecule. Then all these molecules will undergo for the oxidative phosphorylation that is being conducted inside the mitochondria inner membrane, and this membrane is comprises of 4 complexes, the complex 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So via a different redox reaction, this energy carrying molecule transfer the electron, and during this process, a potential gradient, a proton potential is occur inside the inner mitochondrial membrane, and this proton this energy, the proton which is pumped inside the inner mitochondrial membrane space will be used for the synthesis of ATP via ATP synthase, or the FATP type pump, that is known as F-type ATP synthase channel. There are different metabolic state that is present inside our body. Basically, there are 3 different metabolic state. One is absorptive or the well-fed state. Second is the post-absorptive or known as fasting, and lastly the starvation. So the well fed state is after last for 2 to 3 hours after when we eat food. So it lasts for about 3 to 5 hours, that we inside our body we have enough amount of glucose present in the blood. Then we come up with a post-absorptive state that it lasts until 8 to 12 hours after you take your last meal, and then it will end up with fasting when after the 12 hours you take your last meal. So then if it lasts further prolonged up to 72 hours, then that state will be known as the starvation state. Slide we will going to discuss about the role of hormones, what actually the hormones play a part in regulating or integrating different metabolic pathways inside our body. So as you can see in the slide, one of the very famous gland or the organ, that is the pancreas. So it play a very fundamental or the very crucial role in regulating the blood glucose level, acting as an endocrine gland, as well as it act as an exocrine gland also, that play a very important part in the digestive system, or act as in digestion of different proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. So if we talk about their endocrine part, that is based on iris of Langerhans, and it contains a different cell, that is alpha, beta, or the delta cell, and it secretes very important hormones. So what those hormones are? Those hormones are insulin and the glucagon, the very famous hormones, and the homeostasis between the balance between these two hormones, insulin and glucagon, is very much important in regulating the blood glucose level inside our body. So first we will briefly discuss about the insulin, that how insulin works. So insulin is a protein based hormone, a protein in nature hormone, which is comprised of two chains A and B, and these two chains are linked together by sulfate bridges or disulfide bridges, you can say. How does it work inside our body? So whatever the blood glucose that is present inside our body, so insulin act as an indicator, which act as a signal that we have an insulin receptor which is present on our cell surfaces. So the insulin bind with that receptor and give a signal or communicated a stimulus to the cell to uptake those glucose that is present in the blood. So the glucose will be uptake under the influence or the via coordination or the signal through this hormone. So the glucose will be uptaken by the cell via a transporter, or you can say a glucose transporter, that is being present on the cell surface. Slide we will going to discuss about the influence of mainly the hormone insulin in regulating the metabolic pathways, if the insulin is stimulated or the insulin is inhibited. So if the hormone insulin is stimulated inside our body, so what will going to happen? The cell will uptake more glucose by muscles or the adipose tissue. The glycolysis will be more, or the glycogenesis, which is the formation of the glycogen from the glucose, and also the protein synthesis will be more. And if this hormone inhibit or give the negative signal that if this hormone is not sufficient enough, or it inhibits, so what will going to happen inside our bodies? So the gluconeogenesis, or the formation of the glucose from non-carbohydrate sources, will going to be take place inside our body, or the lipolysis for the sake of energy, that is the beta oxidation of the lipids. Then the proteolysis will also going to be happen, that is the breakdown of the protein. And lastly, ketogenesis, that is the formation of the ketone bodies. The second most important hormone, that is the glucagon, that is also being secreted by the pancreas, the alpha cells of the pancreas. It is also a polypeptide chain or protein hormone that is comprised of the 29 amino acid residues, and this hormone basically help to it is used to raise very low glucose sugar level that is being presented in the body. So it will leads to the if we talk about the carbohydrate metabolism, so it will try to increase the blood glucose level. So in the liver it increases glycogenolysis or gluconeogenesis. And if we talk about the lipid metabolism, so inside the adipose tissue it will increase the degradation of triglyceride, and the fatty acid will be uptake by the liver, or it will also accelerate the ketogenesis, the ketone bodies formation. And lastly, if we talk about the protein metabolism, so it will degrade the protein in order to uptake more and more amino acid by the liver, or in order to provide the carbon skeleton for the gluconeogenesis. As we discussed previously about the different state inside the body, now we will going to, on the basis of all these state, now we will going to see that what is the tissue specific regulation, what is the tissue specific regulation of metabolism, and how it is being integrated on a tissue specific level. So we talk about the valve state or the absorptive state. As you can see, all the main tissues are being mentioned in the slide. That is the liver, that is the skeletal muscle or the adipose tissue, or the brain. So in the small intestine, after the digestion or the absorption, the food, the what we eat, so in the form of different monomeric compounds like glucose, amino acid, and chylomicrons, in all these form, it is being absorbed to different organs. It is being taken by different tissues of the body for ATP. So it will if we talk about the liver, so the glycolysis pathway will going to be happen, and the TCA cycle for the energy. And if we talk about the fatty acids, so there's a lot of glucose and the insulin level are high, so the more fat or the TG's formation will going to be happen under the influence of insulin hormone. And if we talk about the brain, so brain mainly use the glucose as a source of energy. So glucose will going to like in the brain cells will uptake glucose and get the energy. And then if we talk about the skeletal muscles, so the glycolysis pathway is also going to happen in that tissue, and we have a lot of amino acids. So all those amino acids used for making the skeletal specific or the tissue specific proteins. And if for example we have due to some exercise or different stress condition, if we have anaerobic condition inside the skeletal muscles, so the glucose will convert it into pyruvate, and that pyruvate is converted into lactate. And mainly the glycogen is stored, or the stored form of carbohydrate, or you can say the glucose, will mainly happen in the liver and the skeletal muscles. And if we talk about the fasting state or the starvation state, that in these state, what will going to happen on a chemical level or the biochemical level, in order to regulate the metabolism inside our body, that to make sure that all the cells get the sufficient amount of energy. So here we have a main role of glucagon hormone, that pancreas will secrete more glucagon in order to maintain the blood glucose level. So alpha cells of the pancreas secrete the more glucagon, and under the influence of that hormone, gluconeogenesis will going to be happen, and the glycolysis pathway will occur by utilizing the all those sources. It get the pyruvate from like a different glucogenic amino acid or the ketogenic amino acid by the conversion of all these metabolites, as I have mentioned in this figure. And the lipolysis will going to be happen, the TGs will going to be degraded into fatty acid and glycerol. That glycerol molecule will also use as a source, like it will convert it into glucose. And if we talk about the skeletal muscles, so the protein of the skeletal muscles will degraded, and these amino acid will also used for gluconeogenesis. And in the fasting state, here the brain tried to utilize the glucose more, But in the starvation phase, when the condition get more worsened, like after 72 hours, when it if you talk about the days, the ketogenesis will be more. So our brain, then in the starvation phase, our brain is dependent on ketone bodies mainly, not the glucose. So in this slide, I have mentioned the references that I have used for making this presentation. Thank you. I hope you understand this topic.